Hi everybody, I'm Paul Rothrock, pgEdge Solution Engineer, and I've got another exciting release to tell you about. In our continuing mission to make resilient infrastructure easy, pgEdge has just released a great new way to deploy and manage your Postgres clusters called Control Plane. Control Plane is a secure API-based orchestration system that uses HTTP requests to build, monitor, and manage your cluster. Let's take a look at some of the key features. Currently built on Docker Swarm, Control Plane offers very flexible deployment options from single primary with failover replicas to multi-zone active-active deployments like the one on the right. You can add logical nodes without downtime, and failover and switchover are available by the API. Finally, it supports backup and restore with PG backrest, either to a mounted drive or an S3 compatible object store. These are just a few of the new features, so be sure to check out our docs to learn about them all. Let's see what it looks like to deploy a cluster, add a node, and perform a failover with the pgEdge control plane. On my screen are two terminals that can submit HTTP requests to one or more of the nodes in the cluster. Because control plane runs on every node, you're not going to be locked out if one node goes down. First, let's set an alias so curl will send the right content type and save us some keystrokes. Since I've already got Docker Swarm set up, with the control plane container running on all my hosts, the next step is to initialize the cluster with an HTTP request to one of the nodes. This will return a token object that we can use to initialize all the other nodes with one command using a little bit of Linux magic. We can monitor deployment with this command in the right terminal. Once the cluster reports back available, we can deploy a database. Here's the JSON I'll be using to deploy the cluster. I've got one pgEdge node with two read replicas in N1 and two other pgEdge nodes running in solo in N2 and N3 with logical replication between all three. Now I'll go ahead and deploy it. On the right screen, we'll start watching the task queue in the cluster to see its progress. After a few moments, the task is completed, and all of the nodes have pgEdge deployed with replication set up, and we can use the cluster. Let's take a look at the current cluster state with JQ helping with the formatting. Now we'll pick one that's not a replica to import some test data into the cluster. And we can connect to the cluster to see the data is on every node. Now let's add a node. To do that, we patch the cluster deployment with a new JSON file that matches the original cluster, but also with the new node. Then we submit a request to the control plane with that new JSON, and it will set up pgEdge and migrate the data. And we can monitor the task's progress on the right terminal window. When the task is completed, we can see the new server in the cluster. And we can connect to that node to see that the data has been migrated. Finally, let's perform a failover. Just like the other operations, this is done using the HTTP API. First, let's get a list of the instances that are under our replicated node N1. Since the API returns JSON, we can use JQ to filter the results. Next, we'll take the instance ID of one of the replica nodes and send it to the failover API endpoint for node 1. Then we wait for that task to complete in the right terminal window. And when we take a look at the cluster health, we can see that the promoted node is now the primary. And there you have it. As you can see, this gives you a great new way to deploy and manage a highly available Postgres cluster. Like I said before, there's a lot more features than what I've shown here, so be sure to check out our docs for more ways you can use pgEdge control plane. Leave a like if you learned something, and be sure to subscribe to see the other great features we're working on. Thanks for watching.